Well, hello! It's so good to see everybody. Welcome back to the Magical Mystery School. Mwah, 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 mwah. And today we're going to start out talking about symbols of the tarot, an introduction. And the reason I emphasize that is because we are going to, in this classes that I'm going to be doing, we are going to be focusing mostly on the symbols as opposed to like divination. So just be prepared for that. And there's a ton of great teachers on the internet for divination. And hopefully this will just give you a foundation. So kind of like with astrology classes, so that when you go to another tarot card teacher or just watch these wonderful readers on YouTube, you'll be able to have a greater appreciation about what they're talking about. So I wanted to mention that. And another thing I also wanted to kind of prepare you for too is, as you can tell from my astrology playlist, I will be looking at tarot through the eyes of astrology as an astrologer. So just keep that in mind too. So there will be a lot of back and forth between those two subjects. Now, my story with tarot is, I think back in my 20s at one point, I got this little tarot deck and I got the little book and I was reading it and doing the spreads. And I kind of got to this point where it was like, oh, should I go to the grocery store? Here, let me pull a tarot card. Oh, should I go to bed now? Oh, let me pull a tarot card. And I kind of, at one point, I kind of went, this is getting a little too much here. So I decided to put the cards away for a little bit. And soon after that, I found astrology. And, you know, I fell in love with astrology and pretty much studied astrology for the next 10, 15 years. And at one point, I kind of went, well, you know, I'm sort of curious about tarot again. And I think I'd been hearing these cross references about different planets and signs and stuff in the tarot cards. So I kind of got a little curious. And back in those days, you went to the bookstore and ordered a book. So I ordered a book at the bookstore about tarot. And what fell out of that book was this card. And you see that? That's the Tree of Life. And on the back of the card, it says, Builders of the Adytum, foremost custodians of Western mystery tradition. Correspondence courses in Kabbalah, Tarot, Alchemy, Astrology, etc. For a free brochure, sincere students may contact. And I'll never forget standing there in that bookstore reading that and going, sincere students? There's nobody more sincere than moi. So I said to myself, I'm gonna follow up on this. So I'm gonna put this up here and hopefully you can get there you go. If you want to get a screenshot of that for the BOTA information. And you can just Google BOTA.org. And Builders of the Adytum. So what is an adytum? Well, that's an ancient word that was used back in the time of the Greeks and Romans and such for the innermost secret sanctuaries inside of a temple. And that's where only the priestesses and priests could go and that kind of thing. And so in BOTA, what we're thinking about is thinking about building an adytum inside of our own self, basically. You know, we've got this big light body and a physical body inside of that. And even deeper inside that, we have other bodies. So, so that's what Builders of the Adytum mean. Okay, now this Builders of the Adytum was put together by a fellow named Paul Foster Case back in 1922 is when he actually established it. And here's a picture of that brochure. If you send off for it, you can see there's the Yod-Hey, Wah-Hey up here, the magic cube, the Tree of Life again. This is reminiscent of the High Priestess and such, and it's called the Open Door. And really what these mystery schools are really about is to help us elevate our consciousness. So I studied that for decades after I found that, the whole evolution of our consciousness. And they have their own history about how tarot was developed and where it came from and such. And I haven't lost my clock. Well, we're going to get 4 bongs on this one. But I'll just persevere. So the history of tarot, like any esoteric occult subject, it's hidden. It's a secret. Arcana, known by very few. So some people say that the tarot actually started in Babylon and the Phoenicians way back, 2000 BC and such. Others see that because the tarot cards that we're going to be using for the most part have a lot of Egyptian and Hebrew symbolism in them. So there's that time when the Hebrews lived in Egypt and there was a real mixing of the cultures and such. And I do recommend, or to read up on a few stories like that, or, just see Joseph in his electric coat. The musical, that pretty much tells you the story of the Egyptians and the Hebrews getting together. And so that's kind of one history. Now the library in Alexandria burned down in 390 AD. And supposedly at that time, a bunch of priests and priestesses gathered up a lot of this secret mystery information and took it to a lot of different places. But one of the places that they could have gone to would have been the University of Fez, F-E-Z or F-E-S, sometimes it's spelled, in Morocco. Supposedly the longest, oldest university in the world. I don't know, but, could be. And that's where a lot of this information was held for a while. And that's kind of the history that the BOTA that we go along with. Oh, and I should have mentioned that Paul Foster Case came out of the Golden Dawn. And so a lot of his information is coming out of this. Now, the Golden Dawn is a mystery school that came out of England. And I would love to go there someday and check it out. But I'm sure that that's a really, big mystery school. So there's a lot on that one. But anyway, so that was the history of tarot coming out of the University of Fez is kind of the BOTA lineage. And that then it came over to Europe about, 1000s, 11, that type of thing. Now you got to remember the Inquisition was going on then. I was actually surprised that the Inquisition wasn't actually outlawed until like the 1830s, which seems like yesterday when you talk about these historical things, and what they were doing at the Inquisition was pretty horrifying. But so you can imagine that was one of the reasons why these intellectuals or priests or whatever you want to call them at Fez, why they wanted to put this mystery education to kind of disguise them into a deck of playing cards. And they also wanted something for people who were illiterate, that couldn't read, that they could look at these pictures. And remember how I've talked about that right and left side of your brain? Those pictures are communicating to your mind. That you are learning, even if it's not verbally conscious in your brain. So another point where tarot history kind of pops in is at the beginning of the Renaissance. Then after the Dark Ages and the Inquisition, I thought was over, but it wasn't until the 1800s in Spain. And but you'll see the royal courts and that kind of thing. You'll start hearing about tarot cards, and they're actually playing card games with the tarot. And we'll talk about the next class. I'm going to go over some of the different decks. And this is one of the historical decks from Marseille. And so the royals were using tarot cards to just play with, we think. Who knows? Maybe they were studying things under covers back then. So anyway, so then in about the 15th century, the Rosicrucian mystery schools started to be developed, and just in general, the Renaissance was the flowering of intellectualism in Europe. So, so I think that'll kind of finish up our history of the tarot. And just remember that the tarot is a book of wisdom, and we'll next time we'll go over the different decks and start looking at that kind of at that information and how we'll be proceeding through these classes. All right, everybody, thanks, and we'll see you next time. Bye.